This is Ryan Finkelstein, the host of Locked On Mets. Excuse the location here as I'm at my Airbnb on vacation, but the Mets have clinched the playoffs. That is a rarity for this franchise and a moment that should be celebrated on the show today, which will be an audio-only podcast on YouTube here. I'll discuss what was a great victory for the Mets, the significance of this franchise clinching a playoff berth, which has been a rarity over the history of this franchise, particularly for the past 25 years. And also Max Scherzer, who is perfect in his return off the IL, what it means to now have a guaranteed postseason berth with a healthy Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer. That is an opportunity for this franchise to potentially win their third World Series. Incredible to have gotten to this point. We'll be discussing all of that on this edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Well, the New York Mets have clinched the playoffs, and while that may feel insignificant with the division still up for grabs, let's celebrate what is still a fantastic accomplishment for this 2022 Mets team that has been so special all year long. In the first segment today, I just want to talk about that. Before we dive into the game, Max Scherzer being perfect through 6 innings, the way the lineup was able to put up 7 runs. We'll talk about all that in the second segment, but I just want to talk about the accomplishment that this team has just given this fan base after so many years where they were absent from the playoffs. Then we're going to close out the show in the final segment, just discussing Max Scherzer's dominance here and what is still the ceiling of this team, which is Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom getting to October healthy. We've been building up to this all year, and it seems like this is the perfect time with these two guys in great health for the stretch run. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, I wanted to just discuss what it means to clinch before we talk about the game, before we go through Scherzer's brilliance and all of that. I'm sitting here, I'm on vacation, and I'm sitting next to my dad as this team clinches here, and it's so incredible the rarity it is for this franchise to clinch, and not to get into some sadness or some sappiness about all of it, but it's been tough to be a Mets fan, hasn't it? I mean, let's just be honest here. I mean, I'm 27. This is an occurrence that in my lifetime we only had in 1999, 2000, where I was, a 4 or 5-year-old boy where, sure, I loved Mike Piazza at the time, but I didn't understand the significance of it. And then we saw in 2006, then there was some collapses from a great baseball team during that era that I certainly loved, and that's the era that made me a Mets fan, the David Wright, Carlos Beltran, Jose Reyes, Carlos Delgado teams. And then you had a huge gap. You had the Bernie Madoff scandal. You had all of the drama that unfolded for all those years. And then 2015, the team finally came into their own. They made the playoffs. And me and my dad were talking tonight, and that was a clinching moment that we remember. The clinching against the Reds, Lucas Duda hitting a big home run, Jeurys Familia closing out, and I think it was a 7-1 game. And I remember my dad crying, and I was teary-eyed as well as we were celebrating the moment there and the fact that it had been almost a decade since they clinched. And then the following year, they clinched in 2016, but both of us were talking about it. We don't remember the team. We don't remember who they clinched against or what the moment was. So I think right now, currently, incredible they clinched against the Brewers. I think this moment and the significance of this game will, it'll really depend on how things shake out. Let's just say the Mets, end up as a wild card team, but they go on a run as far as one side of the playoffs as a wild card team. Maybe this is a significant day. If the Mets clinch against the Braves or clinch the division near the end of the season, that'll probably be the more significant moment that you would remember as a fan. But regardless of what happens from here, this is still a day to be happy. This is still a day to celebrate. This is still a day where you should be driving to work on Tuesday morning and be thrilled, because we haven't watched October baseball for the Mets in a long time, and we're guaranteed of that now. No matter what happens, no matter if the Mets lose every single game from here on out, they will play in the playoffs. And the fact that you have Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer starting any wild card round, if you end up in that scenario, you feel pretty confident this is a team that can at least get to the division round. And then you got a 5-game series, and anything can happen in October. And I'll be talking about it more in the final segment, the Scherzer deGrom element when we get into playoff baseball. And I think we got a taste of it tonight. And we'll be talking, of course, about that throughout the show today, because Max Scherzer was brilliant in this one. But this is a Mets team that just accomplished something that is very rare for this franchise, to make the playoffs. And particularly over the past 25, 27 years, I only know what I've seen as a Mets fan. And you got past the 80s, you got into the 90s, and it was pretty dry for a while when it comes to October baseball. And in my lifetime, like I already laid out, I haven't seen a bunch of it. There's really, personally, as much as, again, I loved the players from the late 90s, early 2000s, I don't distinctly remember those runs. I distinctly remember 2006. I distinctly remember 2015, and obviously 2016 with the wild card game where the Mets lost to the Giants. That's been it. So I'm sitting here today, and yeah, does it feel like you're kind of celebrating something that's insignificant when the division is still in peril? I mean, it's crazy that the Mets' magic number to clinch the division right now is more than the games they have left to play. That's just how it shakes out when you have a Braves team that still has a couple games in hand that you're even with in the loss column. But this is a moment to celebrate. This is a time to embrace where the Mets are. And it was great to see Steve Cohen in the building, because he deserves a ton of the credit here. He deserves a lot of the credit for taking this franchise from where they were when he bought the team, which was just a laughing stock, to where they are now. They're respectable, and you would hope that moving forward, just making the playoffs is as insignificant as some would make you want to believe it is in this moment. Because, yes, making the playoffs as a wild card team is not something you generally want to celebrate if you are a respectable team that makes the playoffs every single year. If the Dodgers were to just make the wild card, yeah, they're not really celebrating generally, because they should make the playoffs every single year. But with this Mets team, considering the history of this franchise, I think it is something to celebrate. And then moving forward, when you're just looking at what Steve Cohen has meant to this team, I think that this is the first of what you hope is many playoff berths, and that's just something that you have to be thrilled about, because this is a franchise that will remain competitive with Steve Cohen at the helm. And I'm glad he was there for this. I'm glad he celebrated the moment with the team, and I like that the team didn't have some crazy elaborate celebration. Now, granted, I'll be honest here. I am on vacation. I'm living into the MLB.TV app. What I saw, it appeared to be a very subdued celebration of the moment. There's the T-shirts. They're taking pictures. They are drinking champagne. I didn't see a big champagne shower. Maybe that happens, and I'm wrong, as, again, I'm recording this at 11:02 p.m. with limited access to SNY and everything else I could see here. But I like that they didn't make too big of a deal about it, because there is still bigger celebrations to come. But I also am happy that they did take the time to acknowledge the moment, because it is significant. I mean, this is a team that is on pace here. I feel like it's not unrealistic to believe that they might win 101 games. If they do that, it's the second best season in franchise history. So you should be really thrilled as a fan. You should appreciate everything this team has given us, because they've given us an amazing run of a season. I mean, I know Paul Francis Sullivan, who hosts Locked on MLB. I've talked to him before, and he's basically said that all a franchise owes you is a summer to remember. They owe you entertainment to get you through the summer, and this has been an absolutely entertaining, thrilling baseball team. And while there has been moments where they have brought in anxiety to the fan base, and there has been some anguish among the most pessimistic fans, overall, you cannot say anything bad about what this team has brought us because they've brought us an incredible ride. And what I want to do throughout the rest of the show, I still, of course, want to actually get into the nitty-gritty of this game. And I also want to discuss what we saw from Max Scherzer, what we just watched from Jacob deGrom, and how the two of them still bring a ceiling to this franchise in October that we've rarely seen before. So we're going to go through all of that in just a minute here. But first, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for a small business, but you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that is why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Once there, you can add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring, and they have simple tools available with like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. You can post your jobs for free at linkedin.com/lockedonmlb. That's linkedin.com/lockedonmlb to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The New York Mets have clinched a spot in the playoffs, but we have yet to discuss how they got there. A brilliant game to go through here on Tuesday night, a rout. 7 runs from the Mets, only allowed 2. Tyler McGill ultimately gives up a 2-run homer. Not the best return from the IL from him, but let's just discuss the fact that Pete Alonso, of all people, was the guy that delivers the game-winning runs. Yes, it was a 7-2 game, but Pete Alonso hits the 3-run homer. You had Francisco Lindor and Jeff McNeil both get knocks in the 4th inning, and then Pete Alonso comes up and hits a moonshot. And how fitting for this team that Pete Alonso would be the one that would deliver a playoff berth. He has been so good this year. That was his 36th home run of the season. He has carried this offense on his back for much of the year. And really the two guys that are on base too. You can't have really a better symbolic trio to be part of the runs that ultimately proved to be the difference here, as Francisco Lindor has been so good this year. I would still argue he's been the best overall player on this team when you factor in the defense and the offense, the fact that he's playing that premium position of shortstop. Jeff McNeil's angling for a batting title. He has just returned to all-star form. 2019, this guy was so incredible. 2020 shortened season, so how much do we take from it? He was good, but not so much that we can really illuminate his greatness out of just that small sample size. And then you get to 2021, and he was so bad that you question everything you saw in 2020 and the All-Star season in 2019, even the rookie year where he was so solid. Now we've seen it. Now we know that Jeff McNeil is the type of guy that could be a perennial all-star, that should contend for batting titles every year. Like I have been saying since I started hosting this podcast in March of 2019, that this was the type of player he could be. The fact that those 3 guys were the ones that scored the runs that ultimately proved to be the difference, I think that's really cool. And the Mets were able to tack on more in the 6th as you had back-to-back triples, a rarity to have back-to-back triples. You had Brandon Nimmo, who tripled, then Francisco Lindor drove him in with a triple, and then Lindor scored on a double by Daniel Vogelbach, who has really been on a tear lately. It's great to see him come into his own. You hope that carries over not only for the rest of this season so the Mets can hopefully clinch this division, but into the playoffs, because Vogelbach being good really does lengthen the lineup. You need that DH, and when you get into October, there's only so many left-handed starters the Mets will face. Who knows if the right-handed bat will be Darren Ruff or Mark Vientos, but that left-handed part of that DH platoon is so much more important. And to have Vogelbach where he's at right now, it's looking very similar to when the Mets traded for him right after the deadline, where we saw this type of an impact. To see him come through, that was big. And ultimately, Tyler McGill returns off the IL, gives up a 2-run homer, but it doesn't really matter. The Mets get a couple runs back in that 8th inning. A big rally. Pete Alonso walked. He stole a base, his 5th of the year. With 2 outs, Tyler Naquin ends up getting a base hit. Pete Alonso scored on the play. And then after Eduardo Escobar was intentionally walked, Tomas Nido, who's been just amazing lately, he drove in a run, 7-2 Mets. So that was the final score. But just a great offensive game to see the Mets put up 7 runs in this one. You look up and down the lineup, and so many guys contributed. I always do this. You look through, and right now, every single starter in the lineup got a hit, and Mark Canha got on base with a walk. So every single starting player got on base in this one. The Mets went 5 for 13 with runners in scoring position, much better than they've been lately. And Max Scherzer, who we're going to talk about in the final segment, I mean, comes off the IL, wins his 10th game. Now the Mets have Carrasco in double digits, Bassett in double digits, Scherzer in double digits. I believe Taijuan Walker is also in double digits. Let me confirm that I'm not talking out of school here. Yeah, he's got 12 wins. So 4 starters in double-digit wins. That's what happens when you have a good baseball team. But Max Scherzer, I wrote an article for Just Baseball you can go back to a couple weeks ago. I guess before he hit the IL. Actually, it was right when he did hit the IL. Because I was basically making the case that had he not had these multiple IL stints, he would have been a Cy Young candidate. He's been such a revelation. We could talk about the leadership, all the different intangibles that he brings. But on the mound, a 2.15 ERA, and if you go through every metric you want to, the sample size doesn't compare to the guys that will win the Cy Young, like a Sandy Alcantara, but he has been just as good as anyone else in baseball. And for this outing, when the Mets are looking to clinch, to go out and give you 6 perfect innings with 9 strikeouts, he faced 18 batters. He struck out 9 of them. What a remarkable performance by him. And that is, again, the ceiling of this ball club. The fact that you have Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom, that's what we're going to discuss in a minute here after the break. But to have these guys healthy and ready to go for this stretch run, that's what we wanted. And now, bottom line, the Mets are in the playoffs. And currently, Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer are healthy. If you told any Mets fan on the planet back early March in spring training that right now you can sign on a dotted line that says, regardless of division or wild card, the Mets will be in the playoffs with Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom healthy, there is not a single fan that wouldn't sign up for that, and that is where we are. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. Max Scherzer returns off the IL and is perfect. I mean, that's what he was. Obviously, would have been great for the Mets to finish the no-hitter at least, if not the perfect game. Tyler Miguel comes on, gives up a hit right away. We'll see how he fares out of the bullpen. That's an ongoing discussion we will have. There are so many different guys that are trying to get into the mix in that pen, whether it be Drew Smith, who's coming off the IL any day now, whether that be Tyler McGill just came back, whether that's David Peterson or Taijuan Walker, who might be pushed out of the rotation come October, whether that is Joey Lucchesi off Tommy John, or someone like Tommy Hunter, who's on the fringes, or Michael Givens, Joely Rodriguez. That is multiple podcasts, and we'll be talking about throughout the final stretch of the season here. But you get back to the real strength of this team. And you have Max Scherzer, who comes off the IL, rearing to go. We knew that he was over anxious to get back out there. Probably didn't want to go on the IL in the first place, but it made sense considering where the Mets were, considering the injury, the fact that he wouldn't be able to take the ball, and knowing that you had a 5-man rotation without him that could get by. We all can understand the Mets' thought process in putting him on the IL, but now here you are. He comes off. The pitch limit, I think Buck Showalter before the game said 70 to 100, which was probably just a tongue-in-cheek comment with the Mets media that he wanted to mess with them a little bit. I think we all knew it would be a little bit closer to that short end of a 70-inning outing, and he does that, and he does that in incredible fashion, being perfect through 6 innings. You have that on the heels of what deGrom did on Sunday, which granted was tarnished by a 3-run homer he allowed, but through the first 5 innings to strike out 13, this is the strength of the New York Mets. You have Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer. deGrom probably be at 10 starts by the end of the season. Arm completely, at this point, looking healthy and ready to go for that postseason. And you would imagine after throwing 101 pitches, he'll be stretched out. When you get to October, to throw 110 to 115, which is exactly where you want him to be. Max Scherzer has obviously gone through it a little bit this year with the side injuries, the oblique, but now he seems healthy. He couldn't have looked any better tonight, and that is what you had to look forward to. The fact that even if the Mets don't close out this division, which we still hope they do, but the Braves are a great baseball team. It just keeps on winning. Even if the Mets end up in a wild card round, the ability to go Scherzer or deGrom, whoever you want to start game one, we'll say deGrom to Scherzer to Chris Bassett, you feel really, really good about the Mets' chances to win that wild card round. And then, although we want the Mets to win the division, to be able to set up their rotation to face like a Cardinals team or whoever else would make it out of that wild card round, as opposed to going head-to-head with the Dodgers, even if you end up in that situation out of the wild card round where you have to square up against the Dodgers, you know that if it's Carrasco or Taijuan Walker game one, not a situation you want to be in, but games 2 through 4 will still be deGrom, Scherzer, and Bassett. That's how the schedule works out. And so even if you were to lose game 1, you feel great about the Mets' opportunity to win those games 2 through 4 and to be able to win that series and move on to an NLCS. So here the Mets are. They are in the playoffs. They have a rotation that is locked and loaded to make noise in the playoffs with Scherzer, deGrom, and Chris Bassett, and even a Carlos Carrasco or a Taijuan Walker, whoever you want to throw in there. I think it'll be Carrasco. That is as good of a rotation as any team will bring into October. They have a lineup that I have a lot of faith in. Looking forward to seeing Starling Marte rejoin the core down the stretch here at some point, or at least by October. But this is a really special ball club, and as much as we are hyper-focused on the division and the fact that the Braves have the Nationals right now and the Mets basically got to sweep the Brewers to hold pace, because I don't see Washington taking one of these next 2 games after they lost the first one. It's just hard to imagine that Washington would go into Atlanta, where this team's on a crazy winning streak at home, and they'll be the ones to disrupt that. But you have your chance here. Hold, sir. Keep on winning. Over the weekend, maybe the Phillies can do a little bit of damage on that Braves team with a 4-game set at home. But we still have to acknowledge and appreciate what has been so rare for this franchise to accomplish. The New York Mets are in the playoffs. And as a fan, as someone that has hosted this podcast since March of 2019 and has yet to host any bit of playoff coverage, I am so thrilled that we finally get to see this team back in the playoffs. And I think the best part about it is I really believe this is just the beginning of what's going to be a great run for this franchise. I think in 3 years, this day will be so insignificant considering what I hope this franchise will accomplish. But at the same time, I'm not going to blow past this date and pretend like the Mets have already gotten to that point where clinching the playoffs doesn't matter, because where this franchise has been, this is still a seminal moment for them to actually clinch it. Not that we didn't expect it, not that we thought they were going to lose out and the Brewers were somehow going to win out and edge the Mets in the playoff race, but it's still nice to know that the Mets will be playing baseball in the playoffs for the first time since 2016, and it'll be for more than a game, because the way the rules shake out now with the new playoff format, they'll at least get a 3-game series, and hopefully it won't come to that, because we should still feel very confident as fans that this ball club can hold serve with the Braves, maintain a division lead leading into that series, And if they win that series, they'll basically be division champs. And maybe the official clincher will have to come against the Nationals. But I don't see any reason why the Mets would not get there if they were able to put themselves in that position. But regardless, that will be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on in Major League Baseball. You can follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.